And welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 244. Today we're going to be looking at the notion of the triptych, or sort of three-photo story. Yes, three-photo story. I have to think about that one. Keep getting it the wrong way around. So, yes, that's what we're going to be looking at. If you happen to be watching live, leave a comment down below. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're from. Let me know what the weather's doing. And we can make a start. Yes, so, and welcome to episode 244. Today's the notion of a triptych, or three-photo story. Now, actually, a three-photo story doesn't have to be a triptych, although a triptych usually is a three-image story. And it kind of goes back in history in painting. But I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get going. In the meantime, if you happen to be watching live, like I say, leave a comment down below. If you're not watching live, but you're watching the follow-up, you can still leave a comment. I just won't be able to respond live. And if you write a comment that is about a specific part, let me know which bit of the video you are actually commenting on, because it doesn't necessarily get a timestamp that goes with it. Right, so yeah, with that, let's just make a quick start. I see we've got a couple of people in already. April says, greetings from a mostly sunny Long Island, New York. Susan says, hello from a bright and breezy Kakubri. Could do with a bit warmer though. 14 degrees C isn't my idea of summer. No, I think, Susan, we've had summer here. We had several weeks without rain and a nice bit of sunshine. That's about as close as summer. If we get any other sunshine between now and next summer, I think we're going to probably be a bit lucky. Janet says, hello from a sunny, breezy Shediac, New Brunswick. Probably pronouncing that all wrong, but I'll go with that one. Andy says, hello, salutations from a sunny Hertfordshire. John says, good day from Ohio. Marilyn says, hello from a sunny Colorado. And Becca joins us from a changeable air. That's over on the east side of southern Scotland. So, yes, here we are. Well, okay, before we make a real start on what we're up to, I'll do a quick update on the Smug Points. So the Smug Points situation is as follows. So this, because of the way things are going, because I'm doing this, I'd already decided on this notion of the three-photo story. I keep trying to make sure I'm not saying three-story photo, because that's a different thing entirely. The three-photo story. I'm going to be setting a challenge for this in a couple of weeks' time, but I'll talk about that more again at the end of the podcast, so make sure you stick around for that. I'll tell you what else is coming up in the month as well. But what it does mean is that Smug Points for May and June are getting combined, having a kind of rollover as such, rather than the way we normally do it, finishing at the end of each month. And as our combination, out in front is Anne from Texas, who is currently on 75 Smug Points, followed by Robert, her husband, also in Texas, 55 Smug Points. VG is pulling up close behind with 40 Smug Points, and in fourth place currently is Meg at 40 Smug Points. But everybody else is, well, somewhere between 0, 5 and 40 Smug Points. Because there's still 4 weeks to go. It's a 5-week thing. That means there's 5 podcast month. It does mean that there's still plenty of opportunity to catch up to become the Smug Points winner of June. So yeah, we'll work out that as we go. So that's kind of where we are with the Smug Points anyway. Now, I will ask you to forgive me if I'm a bit slow, if I miss cues, if I'm hitting the wrong button more than I usually do. I was out very late last night at a drag queen event in Dumfries, which was full on for basically about 6 hours. I was on call, and with an access all areas with the photography. So I was doing behind the scenes, I was doing front of scenes, I was doing portraits in the stairwell. So it was all full on, incredibly interesting. But it does mean that I didn't get to bed till about close to 3 o'clock this morning. So the brain is running a little slow. We have somebody else. Says the O Show. Says good day, good day. Well, good day, the O Show. Welcome to the podcast. Okay, so this is all things photography. And it's Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. So if you want to improve your understanding of photography, then hopefully you're in the right place. Today then, what are we talking about? We're talking about the notion of a story in 3 photos. And generally speaking, what happens with photography is most of the time we are concerned with the single image. Okay, and are we managing to convey the story we want to convey in that single image? And 99% or more of what I've talked about over the last 243 episodes is ways of doing that, is understanding the narrative you wish to communicate and how you then effectively communicate that via, using light, using camera settings, using compositional techniques, all these kind of things. So, but there's the notion of, well, what if we want to do more than one photo? Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be limited to 3. You can do 2 photos, you can do 3 photos, you can do 400 photos. What I'm going to be talking about, though, is primarily in this one about the idea of a 3-photo story. Now, this sort of comes out of the notion of the triptych. And the triptych is, well, tri, is meaning 3. And it's there's a strong religious iconography painting style back several centuries ago. And so the triptych would be 3 paintings in one. And sometimes it would sort of close like a door. So you might end up with, you'd have, let's take a sheet of paper here. You've got, a panel. But then if you kind of fold it in on the edges, so you end up like that, then you could open it up like that. Okay, so, and then what you have is you have a picture in the middle, and then a picture on the left and a picture on the right, which might be related. In this case, if you can just about see the kind of sketches, I've just got Pin Man with angelic Pin Man on one side and devilish Pin Man on the other. Okay, and because we're talking about religious iconography, that's quite often what would happen. Well, there would be variations. You might actually have something like, major religious figure with sub-religious figures either side, or you might have something which is sort of earthly with something hellish or heavenly on either side. But the idea was that the 3 pictures made up a much bigger story than just the single picture. So that's where the notion of a triptych came in, that you would have 3 images and they would all be related and they would all contribute to each other. Now, that's also worked its way into photography as well. So photography can be 3 separate images, but that they are all related and that they all contribute to the overall picture. Now, sometimes they can be placed, the 3 images, into a single panel as such, and sometimes it's just 3 separate photos that you maybe look at in sequence. But it's that idea that together they all create a combined story. Kind of quick, Meg's joined us and says hello everyone. And what else have we got here? So, all right, a couple of people greeting the O Show, and Susan guessing the O Show's from Australia with a good A, and the O Show says yes. Okay, well, it must be early hours of the morning for you then, I guess. Pulling a late nighter. Right, okay, so let's talk around some of the ideas of how you might go about that. So an example then. Okay, so let me flick over to here. So last weekend, across the road, there was a vintage car show gathering. So a bunch of vintage cars turned up. Chance that I nipped across with my phone, took a few photos. This is a lovely old vintage Bentley. Rather beautiful. I don't know quite how old it is, but it's got that kind of 1920s, 1930s look. The running board, the wonderful wheel arches and what have you. So this is just like, so if you're doing a single photo, this is kind of a classic angle you do it at. You shoot from one corner, which allows you to sort of see both the front and the side. You get a sense of the whole car. And that's what you're trying to convey in a single photo, is as much as you can about it. Now, what you could also do is you could shoot it from the front. And this is another kind of classic example. Then here, in this case, in this photo, what we've got is, we can see some of the other cars that were sitting in the car park, where we've got a Mini over here, a bit of a car over here, an MGB there, back of another car there. Now, what's interesting about here is that what I'm now going to do is show you what happens, how we can take 3 different photos of the same car, but and change how it changes depending on. Now, what I did was I used my phone. Okay. Now, this phone has a kind of a standard. It has a 2x zoom and it has a wide angle. And what I did with this one was taken with the 2x zoom. So I leant back and zoomed in and framed the Bentley like this. And this feels relatively in proportion to what I was seeing. The next thing I did was I put it on the normal thing. Now bear in mind, these things at their standard, at their default, tend to be slightly wide angle. So having it on just normal rather than zoomed in, I had to step forward. And by stepping forward, but framing it the same way, it changed the dynamics of it. You can see that suddenly the centre of the car looks narrower because the wings are getting wider, because we've got this kind of slightly wide angle effect. Also within that, we're now seeing slightly more of the cars around. So we've got a Triumph over here now, and this old car, vintage car on the left here is becoming much more obvious as well. And then what I did was I put it on wide angle and stepped in closer. So keeping roughly the ratio of the same overall kind of filling out. And here you can see it changes, and now it looks more like some kind of super hot rod kind of car. So what we have here is we have 3 versions of the Bentley, all taken from the same angle, but what we've done is we've just changed the lens we're using and the distance we are from it. And we end up with 3 quite different versions of the same car. And this notion then of creating something similar, something related. Each of these photos is related. All other things are the same. The background is the same. The cars either side are the same. The lighting conditions are the same. What has changed has been just purely the setting I've had on the camera and how close I've been within it. And I've framed it in relation to the rest of the cars in the same way. So that's one of the ways you can kind of start playing around with an idea like this. Is that you take a single subject and you just change how you photograph it. Now, another option, another way to play with this idea is to take a single subject and change the location. Okay, so with all these things, what we're looking for is a relationship between, rather than it just being 3 random photos. So, again, looking for ideas, I just, earlier in the week, I was out and this little Lego Batman keyring thing that I've got here, happened to have him in my pocket, and I placed him in different situations. So if we flick over to here, then what we can see is we've got our Batman, Lego Batman, and this was on a broken stone wall, okay? And this creates one picture here. So we've got, here he is, sitting here, and what I've done is we've got a certain location. We take a second photo, and Batman is in exactly the same place. In regards to, we're looking straight on at him, and he occupies the same position within the photo, okay? And that's kind of important for this, okay? But we've placed him in a different position. So in this case, what we've done is we've now got him in a field next to a buttercup, bit of clover in the foreground, in the grass. And we're creating this relationship then between, with exactly the same subject, but we're changing the location. And then here's a third one where we're now on a road next to a puddle, got a reflection. And so our 3 photo story becomes this case of taking our little Batman figure and placing him in 3 different locations. Okay, so each of these might work as a standalone photo, but when we combine them, it kind of gives us a bigger picture of the travels of this little Batman figure. This idea goes back a little while. I mean, I remember reading a book, or an essay, I think it was really, within a larger book, short story, The Travels of Hula Girl, where, and this is back about, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And where somebody had this little toy hula girl, and what she did was she travelled all over the place, all around the country, around the world, taking photos of hula girl in this place wherever she went. And I think there's been all sorts of variations on this. I've got a niece who has a little stuffed dragon who takes photos of it wherever she goes in different places. Many, many years ago, 30 plus years ago, 40 years ago, can't remember, I lived down in the south of England, and there used to be, I never knew whether it was just urban myth, but there was this notion of, you get gnomes, garden gnomes, quite more popular in Cornwall, and there was talk of this idea of somebody who would sneak in, steal somebody, he'd stolen somebody's garden gnome, and then gone around the world sending postcards from the gnome from different places around the world, and then one day the gnome mysteriously reappears inside the garden. Okay, so a kind of a fun prank trick idea, this notion that the garden gnome has actually gone on holiday, sent postcards back, and these days of course you can do it with the phone very, very easily. So that kind of idea, though, that you've got the one thing and the multiple locations, increases the size of the story that you're telling. Just checking a couple of comments here. Oh, April said beautiful coloured car and says hello to G'day, the Yo Show. And Becca says fun idea. So let's move on to another idea then. So let's go. We're sticking. What we're doing to begin with is we're starting with the idea of a single subject photographing it three different ways. Then we'll come on to the idea of three different subjects but having a relationship between them. But at the moment, yes, I should have said to begin with that this section is about the single subject and ways you can photograph them three different ways. So another option, let's go back to the cars, obviously getting over at the car show. So here's a lovely Jaguar XK150. So the XK150, lovely Jaguar, and again, but what we've done here, but rather than playing around with lenses, I'm using the same lens and same distance, or not the same lens for each of these three photos on the same car. But what I decide to do now is, rather than change the lens and distance, or rather than place it in different locations, I now photograph it from different angles. So we have one from the front, one from the side, one from the back. Okay, so this then gives us three different ways of playing around with the same car. Now, I did play around with other images. I took photos of the inside, I took photos of details and stuff like that. But for this one, if you're choosing three, what I've decided to do is just, so when you look at the front, you have no idea really how long or what it's like. When you look at the side, you have a completely different feel of it. When you look at the back, you've got a completely different feel of it again. You can't have a single photo which shows all three because the photo's two-dimensional. So what we're talking about here then is that the idea of the three photo story allows us to see much more of what's going on than the single photo than you can. So the first one we talked about with the lenses is about perception of the same thing. The second thing we've talked about is the idea of taking a particular subject and changing the location and background behind it. Now we're talking about taking the subject and looking at it from different angles. But you can go kind of beyond that as well. What if you take the subject and you shift, you do it through time? So, what's this? Oh no, another version of different angles. Yeah, let's just show this one before I get onto that. So this one here is a postbox. So postbox in the wall. Again, these are phone photos just taken around the town. This is a very old one, GR. So that's George, which I think is George V, George VI. They started putting an extra one in there, but so back early 20th century. So this postbox is well over 100 years old, sitting in the wall. So you can take it face on, or you could take it from above, or and you could take it from below. So we've got the same image, 3 different angles, from the front, from above, from below. And it gives us a different feel because the angle we're now taking it at is affecting the perspective, the distance, the balance. Or we go back to the front on, we can take it from the left and we can take it from the right. And again, that changes the way we decide to, how we're interpreting. So that single idea of the straight on is only one version of how we can look at it. When we take it from another angle, actually, we start getting other bits of background in, like a wonky fence, and we can see more bits of the wall. Or here, looking up the other way, we can see bits of the road going up and bits of hydrangea, rhododendron. Somebody else can correct me with the plantage names. Yes. Osho says very interesting. Excellent. Now, another thing we can do is the bit where we kind of take something through different... Oh, Susan says it's rhododendron. Thank you. So here down at Carling Walk Loch, bottom of Castle Douglas here, where I live, this one was taken in the winter. So down at the edge of the loch, there's this tree stump that's sticking out of the water. And when I was down there in the winter, the loch had frozen, and what we can see here is there's frost, bits of possibly snow, but I think it was frost and maybe a bit of snow on top of the bits of logs that are sticking out, other twigs over here, bits of branches, bits of stones and cans and stuff where I think local youth have been lobbing stuff onto the ice just to see whether it would break or not. Okay, so we've got this bleak day. Then what I did was, there was another day I went and visited it about a month later, where I stood pretty much in the same spot. The ice has melted, but it's a foggy day. It's a misty day. In fact, the mist, it was thicker mist as I was walking down towards it, and the mist just started to rise. And so we start to see the back part of the loch there. But this is still winter. Trees still have no leaves on them. The loch is fuller, okay? So there's been more rain, less, there's, whereas if you look here, there's much more of the curve of this part of the trunk is sticking out, whereas here, much more of it is submerged. But now what we're talking about is, instead of it being ice, we're now talking about this very kind of still water. It's a misty day, and we're getting these beautiful, beautiful reflections into the thing. But it's still, in essence, it's the same bit. It's the same log on the same loch, taken from the same angle, but under different weather conditions. And then I was down there last week, and I suddenly thought, oh, I've got those 2 photos, triptych idea, what's it look like now? And now we're into late spring, early summer, and the loch is blooming with algae and lily pads, and it's really fulsome. And so there's a lot of green. The loch, but at this point there hadn't been a lot of rain, so the loch is getting lower again, and as you can see, this bit is starting to stick back out of the water again, and a different kind of photo again. But they are this one, and this one. Now, they're not taken from exactly the same angle, and ideally what I would like to do is to have them from exactly, it's just that I'm crouching down with my phone on a slightly wide angle lens without reference to the other photos. If I was to kind of really try and do this properly, rather than just a quick example to show you what's going on, what I would do is probably mark out a particular point on the grass or just behind, and have a little tripod, stick my phone onto it, work out exactly the right height, exactly the right length, so that I could repeat it each time. Okay, so same spot, different things. Now, a place where I was able to, it's more or less do that, was this. So now we're going to move on to the notion of, again, so this tree here, this tree is, again, just outside Castle Douglas, or as you're heading out of Castle Douglas along an Nesby road, you could turn to the right and there's this big old oak tree. Now, I've photographed this oak tree quite a lot. When I go for my walk, I will just bit. What's great about it is that there's a wall, a dry stone wall running next. So you've got road, you've got wall, then you've got this scene. And there's a particular place on the wall where I can always rest my phone. And what I do is I can place it so that we can see we've got the tree, but we've also got branches hanging down on the left, branches hanging down on the right, which kind of frame it and also create these leading lines at the same time, pointing us towards the tree. I've got it on wide angle, setting on my camera. So because it's always in the same place, it makes it very, very easy to do a photo where actually one becomes exactly this. Everything else is the same. You can position it much more accurately. So then we have this one. So now we're into from a winter scene. Now, also what I've done with this, as well as changing the seasons, I've changed the angle of the sun. So with this one, the sun is behind the tree. And what we can see, we've got some belted Galloway cows here, and the shadow is moving towards us. Okay, so the sun's behind. Then with this one, we're now into spring. We've got that new spring growth, that light pale green. We're also on the trees that are hanging down, pointing towards it. Still got some belted Galloways, different place. But now at this point is further out on in the day. The first one was earlier in the morning. This is now kind of mid-afternoon, and the light is coming in from the right. And we can now see the shadow is moving off to the left of the picture. The third one, this one was taken late last summer, and we're into the leaves have turned much darker, they're much deeper green. The sun is now much later in the day. It's now in the evening. The sun's moved around to the opposite side of the sky, and the shadows are now moving away from us. And in fact, actually, in the foreground, we have the shadows of the wall. And in fact, if we look down here, we can see my shadow, and probably chances are that's my hand holding over the phone, or leaning there to place my phone on the wall. Now, this one was obviously taken last summer because actually the branches that are coming in from the sides aren't coming in quite as far. The tree hasn't grown as much. Whereas if we come back to this one, we can see that in the intervening year, new season, the leaves are coming in closer. I would dare say next year, these leaves here will be overlapping it completely. And there may come a time where I can't get a complete tree. So if you can find a place like a wall or something like that, where you can just kind of wedge or sit your camera or your phone, then you can take the same object 3 different times of the day, 3 different seasons. It gives you that opportunity to really play around with it. And then this is a 4th one. This one was taken back during the winter when we had snow. So now, if I wanted to do a triptych, and well, the other thing is with this is that there's no shadow because there's no sunlight in this one. So when you're deciding to do this idea of a 3-photo story, you might have, if you're kind of going for weather conditions or seasons or so like this one maybe would work if I was doing a seasonal one. So we've got winter, summer, spring. That's also winter, but it's winter without the snow. However, the first 3 that I show you all have the sun in them and shadows. So if you're going to create the 3-photo story, I mean, I've got dozens of photos of this tree under all sorts of different weather conditions and times of the day and times of the year. Picking 3 becomes quite interesting, and this is the kind of the point of the notion of the 3-photo story to keep in mind when you're developing it, is this idea of what's the relationship, what's the story you're creating with the 3 photos? Is it just 3 random photos of the tree, or are you actually creating a progression? So it's moving through the seasons, moving through different weather patterns. What's the relationship between them? Okay, so I want you to keep these things in mind. As I said earlier, I'm going to be setting a challenge for a couple of weeks' time on the idea of a 3-photo story. So everything that I'm giving you now is ideas to play around with, to absorb to how you might approach this challenge. Okay, well, all right, we've got a couple more people in. Let's, where did we get to? Susan says she loved the Misty Loch. Osho says, wow, so different. Robert joins us, says, howdy all from Texas, sorry to be late. VG says, hi from Chennai, got a bit delayed. And Osho saying hello to, or good day to Robert. VG says, lovely photograph of the sky. Okay, excellent. So, we're talking about then that notion of taking the taking the photos then in different seasons. But you can also do across the course of the life of an object as well. So if we take something like this then, so we've got a peony, okay? And in the case of the peony, our photo number 1 is it's just starting to bud. The bud is just starting to come open. Photo number 2, we've got the bloom. Photo number 3 is past the bloom, it's now starting to decay. Okay? So that notion then, that we've got the same subject, we've got the peony flower, pink peony in this case, and we just take it at different times. Unlike the tree, which is still going to be there next year, the difference is the leaves or how the life is. Across the course of a week or two, a flower can go from budding through to decay. I've seen versions of this where you have a dandelion, where you have like the yellow dandelion flower, the dandelion clock, and then the dandelion clock devoid of all the little seed heads. Okay, so you can take this notion of almost birth to decay as another physical progression. Another version of this is the idea of a match. Again, very quickly taken with the phone sitting here behind me. So you have match, blue tack. There's nothing sophisticated about this. I talk about the idea of understanding photography. This is about understanding photography. This isn't about taking world-class photos for which you are going to win competitions. We do that in other parts of this series. When you send me in images for feedback, then I'm showing you how to maximize the quality of your image. For this, we're talking about bit of blue tack and a match, just because I want to show you what I'm talking about. So picture number 1, the match. Picture number 2, the match on fire. Okay. Picture number 3, the extinguished match. Okay, it's burnt out. So that notion here then, that what we're talking about is 3 photos, the same subject, but through time. Okay, so we are creating a story. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, you can multiply this up. You could, if you wanted, start with a little splinter of wood and the ingredients you need to create the sulphurous top. You could finish it with a tiny little stump with bits broken off. You decide where the story begins and where the story ends. But that notion, though, of a 3-photo story, you're trying to look for something which has that relationship. Okay, I hope that then is all making a bit of sense. So that notion then is of a single subject and 3 different ways of photographing it. And what I've shown you then is multiple different ways you can approach this idea of the single subject, 3 versions. Okay, whether it's from different angles, different lens types, different locations, different weather patterns, different seasons, different time levels. Okay, and generally speaking, the key thing about this is that there's always a proper relationship between each of the photos, and in the case of the single subject, that's what's creating the anchor, the link between each of the photos. What's that? Okay, Osho says blue tack, haha, right. Yeah, the simple solution to most photographic problems. Right, okay, so yes, and yes, okay, so while we're here then, the quick idea then, or just to remind you that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, and you would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can do it. The other, of course, you can do is invite your friends, tell everybody else about it, build this community of ours. And a wee reminder that if you're wanting to submit images for critique, feedback, or for the challenges that we have, then we also have a couple of groups. We've got the Facebook group, Facebook.com/groups/UPwKA, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, and we have our Flickr group where you can also, where we've got discussion things, and I keep everybody updated with the Smug Points, and you can submit images, all that kind of stuff as well. Right, okay, so we talked then about this idea of the single subject and 3 different versions of the single subject. Now what I want to move on to is the idea of potentially 3 different subjects that are related. Okay, so if we then say, let's, where do I go? Yeah, let's go back to the idea of our Jaguar here. So this Jaguar was taken from the front. But what we could also do is there was other vintage cars around. So same idea, which is vintage car, taken from the same angle. So in this case, this is Austin Healey 3000 Mark III. Rather cool, nice vintage car, that one. And here's an old Mini as well, Mini Clubman GT, I think. And so our idea here then is this notion of 3 different subjects, but they're all related. They're all vintage cars, but they're all taken from the same angle, under the same lighting conditions, with the same weather patterns. It's a sunny but cloudy day, okay? And the sunny but cloudy day, and then I've squatted down to take the photo from headlight height, okay? And so that gives us then a relationship of all vintage cars, all taken from the same angle, under the same weather conditions. And the fact that the cars are slightly different is what makes the collection as such. Another option for this, let me just scroll that to remind me what's... Oh yeah. Hold on. Not that. Where are we? Yes. So, here's another option. Okay. Salted peanuts. Little dish of salted peanuts, photo taken, fairly close up. And this is about pattern photography. We talked about that notion of texture before now. The without borders kind of idea, fill the frame notion. The kind of thing that probably makes quite a good 1000-piece jigsaw. Although maybe we'd want a larger version of this if we were going to do that. So you could do that. I've got 3 photos here where we've got salted peanuts, but then I've done exactly the same thing with coffee beans. Okay, so same kind of distance, same kind of amount within the shot, same square crop, same kind of lighting conditions, and then here we have a set of pistachio nuts. Okay, so you can also take 3 related kind of, now okay, maybe what I might do is a set of walnuts or Brazil nuts or something, and actually drop the coffee beans and go for 3 lots of nuts. But for the sake of this, again, this is about inspiring you for ideas. Well, I'm just kind of showing you that idea that you can take your 3 photo story allows you for that idea of taking something very similar. In this case, your peanuts, your pistachio nuts and your coffee beans are all around about the same size. We're doing a fill the frame, we're kind of filling it up like that. So that's one of the ways you can go about it as well. What else do we have here? Nadia joins us and says, hi everyone, bit late, but we'll catch up later. That's fine. Glad you could make it, Nadia. Osho says, are all these photos taken on a mobile phone? Not all. For demonstrations, quite often, if I'm looking for something quickly, I've realised we're talking about a particular subject, I don't have a lot of stuff in my folders, then I will grab my mobile phone and go out and take some photos that are reasonable for demonstrations. Otherwise, I will be raiding my archives, and within the archives, some of them will be taken with my proper DSLR or mirrorless camera. Some of them are phone photos. At this point, I suppose it's just an interesting little point, worth kind of repeating, is the idea behind these podcasts is about improving your photography. The camera you use is then entirely up to you. It's understanding that the camera is a tool to create images. And it is one of those things where sometimes people can get very caught up in the tool. And it's like sometimes I've had open days, I've had there's an event called Spring Fling where I open up for 3 days, have pictures on the walls, people come to visit me, and I inevitably get a lot of visitors from amateur photographers. And there's a certain cluster of them who will be desperate to know what camera I had, what lens I was using, what settings were on my camera when I took a particular photo. With the implication being that if they were there with that camera and that lens and those settings, they would have taken the same photo. And my reaction is always, I will happily tell them, because they wouldn't take the same photo. When we take a photo, what appeals to us is based on our own psychology, our lived experience, the way we personally see the world, how our brain filters what's in front of us. And to just give you a quick example of that, and I've used this example before now, with some of the others may have heard. It's like, if you took me, I'm a people photographer. My primary form, I do portraits and photograph people in narrative setups. So that's my primary interest. Now, I will do all the other kinds of photography. They're fun and what have you. But if you gave me a choice, I would photograph people first. Now, imagine you place me, a wildlife photographer, and a landscape photographer all at the edge of a lake as the sun's going down. The landscape photographer will be looking at the scene in front of them, and they will notice the way the sunlight is reflecting off the water. They will notice the way the hills are catching the light in the distance. They will notice the way the tree has become silhouetted. The wildlife photographer will be noticing the way the squirrel that's running up the tree, will be noticing the fish that's jumping, will be noticing the birds that are swooping down across the lake. While I will be busy photographing the two of them, because that's what I'm more interested in photographing people than I am in photographing a sunset or a squirrel. So the point is that you could have three photographers, we could have exactly the same cameras, we could have exactly the same lenses, we could be standing in exactly the same place, but what grabs our interest is going to be unique to us. And this is a really important point. So once you get past that idea, what you realise is the camera, whether you've got a big expensive camera or whether you're using your phone, this is a tool to capture images which interest you. And then what you are trying to do with your images is communicate something to the person who's going to view the images. Unless you're just taking them for yourself, in which case that's fine. But if you're looking to improve your photography so that you can put them into competitions, whether it's camera club competitions or it's online competitions, or even you just want to try and impress a few of your friends on Facebook or on Instagram, then actually what becomes really important here is less about what the tool is you're using and more about your understanding of how to communicate your story. And for that, there's a whole bunch of tools. So different compositional tools, understanding tools which you can use on particular occasions, like leading lines, bracketing, echoes, rule of thirds, symmetry, asymmetry. All these kind of things I've talked about in other podcasts and will talk about again in future ones. Also understanding when whether you're using the auto settings on your camera or on your phone, or whether you decide to override it, understanding aperture, ISO, shutter speed, and likewise understanding light, the difference between backlight, side light, front light, reflected light, combinations of light, colours. All these kind of things become tools to help you communicate your story. The camera is just one of those tools. So this has all gone off on a rather long tangent, but in essence, what I'm to come back to the point that you're asking, no, you just asked, are they all taken on phones? I've implied from what you said that is this podcast only about taking photos on phones? And it isn't. The point is that if you are taking them on phones, or if you are taking them with a big fancy DSLR, or you are taking them on some mid-range or startup bridge camera or whatever, it doesn't really matter, because the majority of what I'm talking about is understanding all these other things. This particular show then is all about the idea of the three photo story, regardless of whether you use your phone or you're using any other kind of camera. So I hope that all makes sense. But great question though, thanks for asking. Just say, yes, that makes sense, excellent. What makes sense? I really like having coffee every single day. That's going back to the coffee beans. Fair enough. Let's just throw the coffee beans back up on. Smell the coffee. Right. Okay. So this idea then, we're talking about three different subjects, but taken kind of in the same way. let's move on to this notion of people. So, as an example, so I'm going to show you now 3 photos I did for a few years ago. I did a set of photos which was about immigration, travel, movement. I did a set of photos of people in our region who weren't born in the region, who've travelled, moved to our region. Now that could have been they've moved from a different part of Scotland to this corner of Scotland. It could have been, or they've come up over the border from England, or it could be from any other part of the world. It was part of a larger project of what was going on at the time, and for this one, what I decided to do, I worked with the organisers of a project called Maul, and we did some experimentations first of all to work out how we're going to do the photos. And what we decided to do was we're going to do faces, and we're going to do them close up to the point whereby, you know, mid forehead, we're not worrying about the top of the head, we're close up, black and white, and a particular kind of side light coming in, lighting up half the face, half the face falling into shadow. So black and white, moody black and white photos, close up, so that we really got a sense of the face. This is Josie. Josie lives just a few miles up the road from where I am. Spanish origins. But here we are, you know, looking deep into a kind of the face, getting close up. This one here is Yolanda. Yolanda's from Holland, and again we've got this different kind of face, and then thirdly, Christina. I was going to say, I can't remember her name. Fortunately, I actually mentioned it up in my file name, which is quite good. No, not Christina, Christiana. Sorry, Christiana. And so what we've got here then is a collection of faces. So we've got 3 different faces, but they are all taken from exactly the same angle, under exactly the same lighting conditions, with exactly the same editing treatment. Okay, so they're all black and white, photographed with light from one side and cropped at the same angle. And by doing that, what happens is the differences between the faces become really distinct. They really allow you to, that's what you're focusing on. That what unites them is the photographic process, and then what changes the story is because everything else is the same except for the face. Okay. Now, another version of this I did was many years back, 2013, I think. So yeah, 12 years ago. During a spring fling event, what I did was to have a bit of fun. I was open for 3 days, and across those 3 days, what I decided to do was I would take photos of people who visited the studio. But to make it more interesting, I got a trilby and I got a trench coat, and I called the event "I'm Humphrey Bogart and so's my wife." Okay, slight little reference there to a kind of parody on the Monty Python line in The Life of Brian. Doesn't matter if you don't get it. The point is that what I decided to do was go for this sort of Humphrey Bogart style. Now, Humphrey, if anybody doesn't know, Humphrey Bogart was a movie star, particularly back in the 1940s and 50s. A lot of film noir, femme fatale kind of films, and there was almost a trademark trilby and trench coat which appeared in a lot of the movies. So I got a trilby, I got a trench coat, and everybody who came in who wanted to take part, I took a photo of them with the same lighting, same angle, put them into black and white, and photographed them. And so what we ended up with was, so say like we have here, Anne. So she's got the trilby, she's got the trench coat, and we've taken it from this angle. But what I did across the course of the weekend, of a 3-day weekend, I ended up taking 127 different people in the costume. Now, for the sake of this, I'm going to show you 3. So we take here, middle-aged woman, but we also had somebody who brought in their kid. Little Cameron here, I think was, barely 2 years old. As you can see, The coat is just sort of fitting. The only way we managed to stop the hat falling over his eyes is to actually rest it onto the back of the turned up collar. But that's the idea of the same angle, and you really notice the difference then in the face, because everything else is the same. And then we come to Gertrude. I think was it Gerd, maybe it's Gerd, I can't remember, who I think was in her 80s. And so we've got middle-aged woman, we've got young boy, we've got older woman, all taken from the same angle under the same conditions. And what we ultimately ended up with was, here was a shot of me wearing the same trench coat and trilby, and you can see in the background all these different photos of all these different people who, because at the end of it, because as I took the photos, I would print them out and stick them on the wall. And we ended up with 127 Humphrey Bogarts spread all over the walls during the course of that weekend. And that was a really fun thing to do. But it's that notion that what you do, to go back to this relationship, is if everything else is the same in a photo, whether it's the location or it's the camera angle, the lighting, the post-processing, everything is the same except for one thing that changes. That's what makes it interesting. So in this case, everything was the same: the lighting, the black and white, the hat, the coat, the angle which we're taking it with. But what changes is the face. And so you become very, very aware of the difference in the faces. But compare that then to the previous one, where we again, black and white, close, moody backdrop, moody black and white photos with the Famoul. The process was exactly the same, the face changed. Go back to the vintage cars, or the nuts and the coffee beans, everything's the same except for the subject, or part of the subject. And that's really what makes it interesting. Now, so like I say, it can be 3 photos. In this case, it was 127 photos, but that also allows you, if you wanted to just do a 3-photo story, you can decide. Now, I could have done young, middle-aged, old, which is kind of what I did with that. But I could have done male, female, androgynous. Could have done different, thin, medium, heavy, tall, short, medium. You can select and pick whatever you want. But it's that notion of just what you're trying to do is create a story whereby at least if it's a 3-photo story, that those 3 have a relationship to each other. Where are we? April says great idea, Kim. Osho says amazing. John says brilliant idea with the trench coat and people. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So that notion then of we've taken this idea of you can unify these images by taking them from the same angle with the same camera settings, same kind of setup. But you can also unify images in other ways as well. So now, a couple of years ago, I think I talked about a photo shoot I did with Annalise and Phil. So, and then we talked about the notion of colour grading. So what I'm going to show you here then is this photo. So some of you may remember this one. So we've got Annalise and Phil on the sea wall at Ayres, which Becca will know very well because she lives in Ayres. She also knows Annalise. And so what I was doing with this, I took a series of photos, took a whole set of photos. Now what I'm doing here is I'm going to show you 3 photos because it's a 3-photo story. And what we were trying to do was create something very cinematic. And so what we've got is this sort of 2.39 to 1 ratio, crop ratio, okay, which gives us this nice panoramic cinematic image, okay. And then here's another one from the series where we've got the same crop, different angle. They're now sitting eating ice cream on the sea, leaning against the sea wall. But as well as the crop, what we've also, you'll notice, is the same colour scheme. So colour grading. I applied a particular kind of colour grading where I was desaturating the colours slightly, giving little bits and pieces got another episode all about colour grading in the past, but I can talk about it again in the future at some point. But that notion that what it does is it creates a link. It links the two photos together. And then the third photo we've got here, Annalise eating 2 ice creams on her own. This was of the set. I must admit, this one was always my favourite because I like the kind of ambiguity of the fact that she's there. If you don't know, if you haven't seen any of the other photos where you can see she's with Phil, you know she's with Phil. So here, chances are she's eating an ice cream while holding one ready for Phil when he comes back. If you haven't seen the other ones, you might well read this by looking at it and go, she thought, sorry, I'm having 2 ice creams. She's tucking into one and then we'll tuck into the other. That's always a fun part of photography, is where you can get multiple layers of interpretation on the same image. But for this one, these 3 photos, as well as starring Annalise in each of them, Phil in 2 of them, what's combining them, what's uniting them, is the fact that we've used the same crop and we've used the same colour palette and we've used the same people and the same location, but the location are from different angles, the people are from different angles, but that crop and that colour grading all makes it feel like they're clips from the same film. If you've seen bits of this, taken, you would assume they were from if they were scenes from a movie, you would assume they were all from the same movie. Okay, and movies do this all the time, is they use colour grading to create a particular mood and feel. What have we got? Oh, Becca says, yep, know that wall so well. I've walked along the top of it many a time. And she loves these images, very film-like. April says she loves the heart sunglasses. Yeah, I thought it was kind of fun. Okay, so what we've talked about then is this notion of 3 photos that are related. Okay, but when we came in, I'd also talked about this notion of a triptych. And a triptych, generally speaking, is where you take those 3 photos and you combine them into one. So on the one panel, well, so it's like 3 panels into the one. So to go back to this idea that you can take a piece of paper, fold it in half, and then open it up, and then you actually end up with 3 different images, which you might, that way around, where you've got 1 image and then 2 to the side. And that comes from the old idea of very often in religious iconography, there might even be a picture on the front as well, and then you opened it up and then you might have different depictions of, religious depictions where they're related. So that notion of the 3 of them together in one place, that really takes this notion of a 3 photo story up to the next level. By what we're doing here is, it's not just that we look at 3 separate photos, but we can see how they're related. We're now trying to look at the whole thing and seeing they've got to relate to each other, but then they've also got to work as a group. So let me show you what I mean by that. If we go back to the match photo, for example, we can now look at this. If we happen to have them, we place them all together. So rather than looking at them in sequence or as they appear on the screen, we now have one panel with 3 images, and that allows us to take in the whole photo at the same, take in the whole story at the same time. And again, to note that the photo is taken from exactly the same angle under exactly the same lighting conditions, so that what changes is, so what we have is we have this sequence that runs from left to right. Now, interestingly, to go back, I keep mentioning this one and I've still never yet found an answer, so keep listening out, let me know if you ever do, which is, we always tend to read from left to right, and that is, I'm convinced because culturally we do. Culturally, here in the West, we read from left to right. I would love to know if, because there are other cultures where you're brought up reading from right to left, okay? And I'd be really interested to know whether people who are brought up in a culture that reads from right to left, whether they happen to view pictures, they read a picture from right to left, rather than from left to right. Because I cannot help but read a picture from left to right. And that means sometimes when a photo isn't working one way, if you flip it, suddenly it works better the other way, and vice versa. But in this case, yes, if we had the images the other way round, it wouldn't necessarily make quite as much sense if you happen to read from left to right. So, match, burning match, burnt out match. Okay, so it allows you to read the whole story together when you do this. Now, for those of you who noticed the cover card that I created for YouTube and for on Facebook saying what was coming up, here what I did was to go back to the tree that we were talking about earlier. This is 3 different photos of the same tree taken from the same angle across the different seasons, but because they were all taken from exactly the same angle, it actually allowed me to line them up relatively easy in Photoshop. And then by having this little white border around it and between the bits, what it did was allows us to go from winter through to spring, through to summer, on the same tree in the same photo. Now, interestingly with this one is, whereas this one, all these panels are exactly the same width apart, when I did the same width apart on these, because the majority of the tree is in the middle, it didn't feel like there was enough on the left or enough on the right. So actually what I did, you will notice, now I've pointed it out to you, you will notice more closely that, or more obviously now, that the middle panel is thinner, okay, than the outer ones. And that's because I wanted to kind of spread the content a bit more. It just made it works better when you can see a bit more of the winter tree and a bit more of the summer tree. When I had this exactly, the summer and winter was less, there was less tree to actually notice. But this is a fun kind of idea you can do at all, as well. So, okay, what are a couple of... Oh, VG says, OMG, this is so pretty. 3 seasons on the same tree. Probably if black and white came in between, there would be more balance. That's possible. April says, very seasonal picture with the tree. And that's it. So, in this notion of the triptych, what you're doing is you're taking the very same picture and just dividing the same picture into 3. But rather than it just being any random picture which you've cut into 3, there's a progression, there's a difference between each of these sections. I've seen variations on this as well, whereby maybe you have different colour gradings, or again, you could do different times of the day. You could do, there's all sorts of variations you can do on this, where you take the same subject, but there's a reason for having difference. You've got to understand, if you're trying to really, I suppose it comes down to communicating the story. I had a little interesting chat with Maggie the other day about this, about that notion of how obvious do you need your story to be, or how obscure, how much of a puzzle is it for you to work out what is the connection between the 3 photos. And most of them tend to be fairly obvious, but you can get a little bit obscure if you want. And it's almost like the difference between, some people quite enjoy an easy crossword and some people really love a difficult cryptic crossword. So depending on your audience, you might decide that you've got 3 photos together and that you've got to hunt a little bit to find the relationship between the 3. What you have to understand though is that if you do that, the more hunt you have to do, the more audience you lose. So now that's fine if you are creating something for a very specific audience. But if you are going more generalist and you're trying to put these pictures into, some like online competition where you've got a crowd vote and people are scrolling through quickly, then the more obscure it is, the fewer votes you're going to get, because people are just not going to understand. They're not going to take the time to understand. So as with all these things, as I've mentioned before, the first thing about, in terms of what you might quote as a successful photo, is know your audience. How is your audience going to receive it? Who is looking at it? Under what context? And what are you trying to communicate? And how well is that audience feeling communicated to by what you've expressed with it? Okay, so I can see Becca said, if you read manga, or even in translations, the books open the opposite way to the Western books, and the comic panels are read from right to left. Okay, yeah, that's fun. That's interesting. Okay, so if Japanese manga, then it reads the other way. Yes, that would be interesting then as to how you would read. In that case, would you go with this one? I mean, this one could look a bit more like autumn. You'd go summer, autumn, winter. Skip another season. Osho saying very interesting podcast. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. And April says glad you like it, Osho. Hope you join us again as well. Yes, by all means. I'm here every Sunday, 3 p.m. UK time, and that'll be whatever time you are, whatever the time is difference is where you are in Australia, because that's also going to differ depending on whether you're East Coast or West Coast as well, I think. VG says, Triptych or Triptych, trick, trying to catch the word since 2 weeks without any luck. Okay, it's Triptych, so Triptych. Okay, so Trip, so Triptych, Tych. That's how it's spelt. But it's spelled. Susan spelled it with 2 Y's, in fact, Triptych. Okay, maybe there's different multiple spellings. I've always understood it to be Trip with it and then Tych. But I think there's variations. Suddenly you put that, Susan, and I'm sure I looked it up, and now I feel absolutely full of doubt. Right, so there's that notion of this. So, but what I've shown, whether it's this one or this one, what we're talking about is the notion of progression. Okay, so we're moving across time, so across season. But you can also, if you've got a triple photo, you can have them, how do they work together? So in this case, what we've got is, so using the little wooden mannequin here that I keep behind, just 3 different positions, okay? And, okay, you can't quite see the head in this one, so let's just pull that down there so you get a slightly better sense of what's going on. So in this case, what we've got is we've got the one in the middle, leaning forward, maybe hands slightly up, maybe looking slightly distressed. The one on the left, arms up. The one on the right, pointing a hand. So it looks like there's an interaction between the 3 of them. So the 2 on the outside are looking into the middle. Okay, so that then means we've got 3 standalone images, but the images combine in such a way as to feel more like one panel. Okay, so that's one way you can play with it. Another version of it, if we go onto our post boxes. So if we think about that notion of the post boxes here, then we've taken those angles. So we've got the one straight on at the front, and then we've got those side ones sitting on the edge, and that's creating a pattern, a kind of symmetrical pattern. So it doesn't matter whether we read left to right or right to left. Actually, what we tend to be doing is we're reading into the middle and then spreading out afterwards. Well, what changes it, interestingly, if you're doing it this way, is to think that, well, you can have it so you can have the piece in the middle and then you can have the pieces on the edge. Or, you can have the pieces on the outside, pointing in, and that changes the shape of it. There's another little bit I just wanted to point out, which is with this one, what I've got is I've got the lines in the middle. Okay, so that's setting off the panel. And in this case, this panel is more like our little triptych here, whereby the ones on the outside are half the width of the ones on the inside. So you could essentially almost close it in like that. Here I've removed the lines, and actually if you remove the white lines, then it becomes slightly, could this actually be a photo in its own right? It doesn't necessarily sit comfortable. I mean, this bit of wall could in fact be just where the wall curves round, and in fact there's 3 different post boxes. Less convincing on here because the ivy suddenly comes to an abrupt halt in the way that it wouldn't. So the advantage of having the lines is it does at least separate out a little bit, makes it much easier to know that it's 3 photos, as opposed to like this where maybe it could be 1. But I did want to just show that this other version here, which is, again, I don't have the white lines in this, but that notion of the side ones pulling away or the side ones curving in, now we're kind of looking into a cube. So if you're doing 3 photos together, what we're talking about is the way they all combine. It's not just about sequence, it's about how they look as a whole as well. So each of the photos working as an individual, but then each of the photos contributing to the whole. And that's really part of what Triptych is, and also 3 photo story, that all 3 photos need to be contributing to the whole story as well as whether they work on their own or not. And just one final thing on that notion of how they can look and the layout is everything I've shown you so far has been symmetrical. It doesn't have to be. So we go back to our Bentley, and here we've got another version where we've got the Bentley, we've got that angled photo of the top showing you what it's like, but then on the inside I've got, well, here I've got a picture of the inside where you can see the steering wheel and the walnut dash and everything else, and then over here I've got a shot of the what do you call it, logo isn't the right word, but the bit that says Bentley, and for that matter in the reflection you can see it's a selfie. You can see me, you can see the phone, you can see my fingers holding the phone, and because it's distorted because of the way the chrome changes, I've got a kind of funny little version of me within that. So here then, so none of the pictures are the same size, but they are all representing different aspects of the vintage Bentley. Okay, so huge amounts of information here. So let's just kind of do a kind of wee summary of that then. That in essence, what we're talking about is, let me just pull this out. When we're talking about the three photo story, you can either take one subject and photograph it in three different ways. Examples being three different lenses, like the distance you're at and the lens you're using, or the same subject in three different locations, or the same subject with three different angles, or the same subject under three different weather conditions or seasons or times of the day, or even it's three different stages of life as such, a kind of birth, life, decay kind of through time. Then there's the notion of three different subjects that are related in some way, and with these ones it becomes really important that you've got to connect that. Essentially there's something where everything else is the same that's combining it, and that combination could be it's three very similar subjects taken in the same way. It's like the notion of three different car fronts. Or it could be that you've got the same lighting setup, you've got the same editing setup, you've got the same color grading, you've got the same crop, and if you match everything up so that you've got the same crop, you've got the same color, you've got the same editing process, you've got the same camera angle, but then the subject changes, then that feels like, whilst the subject is different, it's everything else that's making the relationship between the three photos. Then finally there's this notion of your presentation, that you can have the three photos individually, look at them one at a time, or you combine them into a proper triptych. The triptych then being where you have the three photos in the same photo. So they're like three panels within the one photo. Okay, and that's essentially what a triptych is. And you can do that by having balanced everything, looking at the same width, or you can have it by changing the width. You can have it in sequence as it moves through. You can have it in something so that the outer ones are looking inwards or the inward ones are looking outwards. Or you can even go asymmetrical and just have it kind of dotted all over the place. But the key thing is that there's a relationship between all the photos, and that all the photos combine to make a bigger story than the one photo alone. And that's the key bit, okay? The key bit of a three photo story is that the three photos need to give you a bigger story than the single photo could. So I hope that all makes sense. With all that in mind, I'm now going to set the three photo challenge. I'm not going to do a triptych challenge, because the triptych, as in like everything being into the one panel. Now you can do it as a triptych if you want, but what I'm aware of is that not everybody who watches these podcasts has access to the editing software that will allow you to combine the images easily, or even at all. If you don't have the right editing software, it will be an absolute nightmare to try and do that. Now, if you do have the editing software and you want to create something, then please do. Otherwise, though, don't worry too much about it. Just send three photos. But keep in mind that you're looking for a relationship between the three photos, and chances are you should probably be cropping, color grading, or editing them in the same way so that they are related. Send your images, where do we go? Either place them in the Facebook group, the Flickr group, or email me, kim@kimayres.co.uk. Send me the images. Now, we're going to have it in 2 weeks' time. It's the 8th today. So not on the 15th, but the 22nd, so the podcast of the 22nd of June, I will then go through these photos that everybody sends in, and we'll explore and celebrate everybody's different take on what the 3-photo story is, and hopefully we'll inspire each other with ideas of how we can take this idea into the future. So that's very much then that notion of the 3-photo story and the challenge then for 2 weeks' time. Get your photos to me no later than Friday the 20th, because I still need to have time to kind of pull them all together and get the podcast ready. And then what else have we got? So next week on the 15th of June is going to be a feedback session. Okay, now I already have images from Robert and from VG have been put in for feedback. So I've got space for potentially up to 2 more. So if you would like to get feedback on your particular photo, then send me your image and tell me your struggles, what your difficulties lie with the photo, a little bit about the background, what you're trying to achieve with it, and I will do my best to help you, whether that's helping you refine the narrative, adjust the editing, whatever it is. If you've got photo that you would like feedback on, and this is really a brilliant way to improve your photography. There's very few places on the internet or in the world where you can get genuine feedback from a professional photographer on your photo, or even if it's a photo you really like but you would like to know how to kind of improve it a bit more. Or maybe it's one that you put into the competitions and the challenges and it never really does particularly well, and you'd like to get past your own blind spots on that. That's what this is for. So get your images into me. So that's for next week. So I've kind of on a first come first served. So get your images into me as soon as possible, but certainly no later than this coming Friday, which will be the 13th of June. What have we got here? Becca says, I'm away next week on a writing retreat in Galloway, so I'll have some free time to attempt some new images. That's great. Okay. So where are we at then? I think that's pretty much about it. A quick reminder, if you find the podcast useful, interesting, and would like to support them, then buymeacoffee.com/KimAyres. Of course, don't forget to like this video if you can. If you've not done it yet, before you run off, click like on it if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't done already. And if you have subscribed, click the notification bell so you get notified when these podcasts start each week. I think that pretty much brings us to a close. So that's it then. The three. One last thing though is if anybody happens to be living locally, next Saturday, the 14th of June, I'm actually doing a 3-story photo workshop, but it is specifically designed for mobile phones. So it's a free mobile phone workshop at the Crannog in Castle Douglas. So that will be at 2 p.m. at the Crannog Lochside Park in Castle Douglas on 14th of June. Right, I think that's pretty much us. Thank you everybody for turning up. Thank you for leaving comments. Thank you for asking questions. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Take care. Bye-bye.